I'm working on the panel lining for the Kratos. This is in preparation for part 2 of the video series. It's just going to be 2 parts. And the first part of that video is going to be comparing the old Citadel shades and the new formula. Now, I go over it in the video in about 10 minutes. This video is going to repeat some of that, but I'm also going to say some editorial that wasn't in that first video. Now, if you're not familiar with them, Citadel makes what they call shades. It's essentially acrylic washes. And I won't go too much into the application of them. I've talked about that in other places. But they work well. I like them. I use them a lot, especially the big 3. Agrax Earth Shade, which is a brown color, Seraphim Sepia, which is a sepia kind of reddish brown color, and Known Oil, which is a black color. And even though it's called Known Oil, it's not oil, it's acrylic. I've been surprised at the number of questions I get about that, which reminds me I always need to clarify that. But, you know, Citadel had come out with their contrast paint range a few years ago, and they've released some new colors that are very nice. Some of them single pigment colors, very bright, very vivid, good looking range. I've got a few of them I'm going to be using over the next few months. But anyway, they also reformulated their entire shade range. They have more than just those 3 shades that I mentioned. They have, I don't even know how big the range is. It's a fairly extensive range with quite a few colors in it that work in a variety of situations very well. But they reformulated them to basically be more like contrast paints. Now, the benefit of contrast paint is you paint it over a lighter color, and it pulls away from the more prominent areas, and it settles on the flat areas and kind of stains it a certain color and settles into the recesses. So in one coat you get shadow, highlight, midtone. The idea being you get your models painted ready to game faster. So that's the idea behind them. Well, they decided to apply that technology to the shades because one of the criticisms of the shades is that they quite often, if you're not very careful, they'll leave tide marks or they'll be pooling or things like that. Again, because they're not oils or enamels, you can't go back really and blend them in and clean them up and things like that. So and it doesn't surprise me that they did this because I've used the contrast paints as shades quite often because I just saw immediately they work really well at that. So it doesn't surprise me that they said, hey, this is a thing, let's look into this. Now, Games Workshop had a secret session at one of their recent events over in the UK where they invited content creators, I was not one of them certainly, to go into a secret session. They had to sign an NDA and all of that. And they basically gave them access to all of these new shades and these contrast paints and had people there to answer their questions and just let them work with them for a while. And then a lot of those folks, they gave them early access to the product so that when the product, just prior to the product launching, there would be a lot of content out there about it. And so I heard a lot of different opinions about it. And everything from, these are great, I love them, to, I'm going out and I'm going to buy every bit of the old product I can because they're replacing all of the old product with the new stuff. As I understand it, I talked to the guy at the local Warhammer store and he said, once the new stuff comes in, we're returning the old. So he said, at least, that was, now this was back before it was released. He said that was my understanding of what we're going to be doing. So I haven't been back in there since then, but I'll assume that's what happened. Several of the creators have said, "Oh, I'm going to go out and buy all the stuff I can off the shelves and make sure I have a good stock of the old stuff." Because in my testing, the old stuff and the new stuff do behave slightly differently. But the thing that I guess you'd say disappoints me with some of those, because one of the things that I think about, and it may be prideful of me to think about it this way, but it still concerns me, is, if you're building models and somebody asks you, what do you think of this product or that product? Well, you just tell them what you think. But I think there's a different responsibility if hundreds, if not thousands of people are going to hear what you say. I think you have to be a little more nuanced about what you say. And, with the understanding that one person may completely hate a product and another person may completely love it. And, as a creator, I think it's important to present objective information. But I heard all of these opinions, and so I was expecting, when I tested it out, to not like, and I should know better than this, but I was expecting to not like the new stuff based on what I heard several people say. And so I was quite surprised when basically I came away going, it's not that much different. And it got me to thinking about it. And here, 10 minutes in, I'm finally arriving at the point of this blog. Things change. And I think the measure of a modeler, people are always, trying to classify it. I guess I do, but I don't. Understand why people are always, I've had people essentially ask me, they don't come straight out and ask it, but what they're essentially asking is, do you think this is an expert technique? Am I doing an expert technique, whatever an expert is? I had a friend in the aircraft modeling world, Edgar Brooks. He passed away a few years ago, a gentleman in England, but just knew so much about Spitfires and did massive amounts of research on the Spitfire at the RAF Museum, uncovering documents and things like that had been, buried away in some place for a while. But I mentioned one time, I said, "You're an expert on Spitfires." And he said, "I have a very low opinion of the word expert." He said, because if you examine it in its component parts, X means former and spurt means a drip. And he says, that at best means I'm an X drip. But, I think I've lost track of what even point I was trying to make, but, people worry about, is this an expert technique or that an expert technique? I don't know so much that it's a technique that makes you an expert, whatever that is, and as wide a definition as that can be, and as subjective a definition as that can be. I think if you're wondering, am I a more advanced modeler? It's your ability to adjust. It's your ability to adjust to things. It's the ability to correct things. It's the ability to maximize the use of the products you have. And as I work with these new formulated shades, and albeit I'm just working with, right now I'm just working with two colors, Agrex Earthshade and Nuln Oil. It just really struck me that, okay, this is one of those situations where, you know, I get that somebody may like the new stuff versus the old stuff, or the old stuff versus the new stuff. I get that. I mean, you know, preference is preference. There's nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, I think the most helpful thing to say is, okay, these are changing. And if you really like the old ones, then you're going to have to either go out and get a whole bunch of them and hope they last, or find a suitable replacement. But really, I think the helpful thing to say is learn to work with the strengths and weaknesses of each product, and you'll be okay. And what I've found, like in using this new formula, that's what I'm using now, the new formula, is it doesn't stain the surface quite in the same way that the old formula did. It doesn't stain it quite as much, which in some cases is not ideal. In other cases, it is ideal. Let me give you an example real quick. Let me set this down. Whoops, let me wash that off first. Here's two guns that I did in the video. The one on the left I did with the old formula. I just blobbed Nuln Oil on there. The one on the right I did with the new formula. And you'll notice around this part of the barrel, the old formula leaves more of an oily look to it, more of a stained look to it, whereas the new stuff, it leaves a little bit of it, but it's a lot less, and it pulls back. Now, I'd heard several creators criticizing that, saying, you know, in this case, I like the effect that that has, and wishing that the new formula would do that. Well, I put it on and I saw that, and I thought, okay, that means it goes better over smooth surfaces, but it doesn't leave this staining. So that means if I want more staining, I need to do some kind of thing on here to give a little bit more of a textured surface to give it something to grip onto. It's just a slight adjustment that has to be made for that. And you know, it's stuff like that. Here's another example. These two hatches. The one on the right is with the new formula. The one on the left is with the old formula. I like the way the new formula goes around the bolts. It seems to self-feather, if that makes sense, better than the old one. Both have a little bit of staining, but I think the new one does a little better job of going around bolts. So that's something that I like. But, you know, as I use these, I see the good and the bad of both of them. But as I work with the new one, I can go, okay, if this is all there's going to be, and I want to use these shades, then I'm okay with that. Now, here's a little secret that I did not mention in the video, just to not confuse matters, to keep it a little more focused. If you like the way the old Citadel shade formula works, if you try the new one and you prefer the old way that it works, then consider getting some of the Vallejo game color shades that I've shown before, because they behave exactly like the old Nuln Oil and Agrex Earthshade and stuff like that. So those may be attractive to you, assuming Vallejo doesn't change their formula. Those may be attractive to you because they work the exact same way, and they're cheaper. The one thing I don't like about the new shades is that they went from I believe a 23 milliliter pot to an 18 milliliter pot, but they did not change the price. And I'm not a huge fan of that, but you know, nothing I can do about that. But anyway, this is less about shades and more about adjusting in modeling as products change. You know, figure out, how can I make this work? I've always said, you know, when people ask me about certain paints or airbrush brands or this or that or the other, I tell them I always feel like I can use any of it. Just put it in my hand and I'll make use of it. You know, that's when you feel like you're really getting somewhere, is when you can go, just give me stuff and I can do something with it. I can figure it out. And I think that's a much better position to be in. I think that's where, if you're going to, start using the word, if you're going to start using the word expert, if that has meaning to you, then I think that's where you're really getting to it. All that said, I do like the new shades, and I'm not going to have any problem switching to them.